In this video, we are going to be talking about surveys. Now, in my humble opinion, I think that surveys are one of the most important pieces of the event planning process. This is how you will get feedback from your attendees. This is how you'll find out what they like, what they don't like. And not only that, but you'll also be able to just gather general data about your attendees as well, so that you can start making data-driven decisions in your events. In order to throw an amazing event experience or whatever it is, it's really important to understand the person that you're throwing the event or experience for. And a great way to do that is to simply give your audience and your attendees surveys so that they can give you feedback and so that you can have a deeper understanding of who they are. Now, I'm going to link some of our surveys down in the description below. And I'm also going to probably make another video where I actually go through one of the surveys and explain the questions deeper. But in this video, I just want to give you some do's and don'ts of surveys so that you don't make the same mistakes I made early on. All right, starting off with do's. The first do that I want to mention is that you typically do want to make your surveys anonymous. And this is typically for surveys where you're asking for feedback, but you want your attendee and you want your audience to feel comfortable giving you honest feedback. And if they have to put their name and their email on the survey, they're probably not going to be very honest about what they actually think about the event. Now, if your survey is for something different, maybe it's an application for your event, or maybe it's a pre-event survey. If that's the case, then maybe it's okay to ask for their name and their email. However, if you want them to feel comfortable and you want them to be honest, I would recommend to make the surveys anonymous. Up next on these surveys, you want to ask what your attendees enjoyed and also what they didn't enjoy. This is important because you can collect what most of your attendees like and continue to apply that to events. And you can also look for trends in what attendees didn't like so that you can correct them for future events. Getting both of those angles is extremely important. Along with that, you also want to ask for general feedback. This is a broad enough question where it really gives the person filling out the survey complete freedom over how they answer. The feedback could be positive or it could be negative or it could be a mixture of both. But some of the most valuable nuggets I've pulled from surveys have been in those general feedback sections. Something else I like to do with my surveys is have a satisfaction score incorporated into it. And as I mentioned in earlier videos, I actually use an attendee satisfaction score as one of my KPIs to determine if I'm doing a good job or not. But it really is nice to have a quantifiable result from your event. You got a 4.4 out of 5 stars on your event. That's a numerical value that you can actually show to people and show to your community and show it to yourself to determine if your event was successful or if it was a failure. And you don't have to do it out of 5, you can even do it out of 10. Like this most recent event, we did the satisfaction score out of 10 just so that I could get more specific answers from my attendees. And we ended up getting an 8.9 out of 10 stars on the event, which I was pretty happy with. Collecting an attendee satisfaction score also gives you a good way to compare to other events that you've thrown. That way you can tell if your events are getting better or they're getting worse. And if you want, you can also use these surveys as an opportunity to ask other questions to your community or the attendees that are attending the event. If you want to know who they are, what problems they're looking to solve, what they find most valuable out of events, what they're looking for when they come to these events, where they came from, whatever it is, it's not a bad idea to ask these questions on this survey, but you want to limit those questions because you really want the survey to be about the event itself. And if you start to go down these rabbit holes of other questions that don't really have to do with the event, it could cause somebody just to stop filling out the survey because they get annoyed, or it could make the answers on that survey less authentic. It really is a balance. Something else I like to do with my surveys is if I'm questioning something about the event, I'll just simply ask it on the survey. If you're questioning if your attendees want more food and beverage, or if they want more networking, or if they want a room block, or if they want better music, or if they want better speakers, you can just ask them on the survey and make decisions based off of those answers. It really is pretty easy. The last do that I want to mention is you either want to give people an incentive to fill out the survey or strategically place it somewhere in the event so that they have to fill it out. One issue that we used to have with our surveys is we would just throw them up on the screen at the very end of the event as people were leaving the room, and we'd probably get about 10 to 15% of the room to fill out the surveys. However, with our more recent events, we actually make them fill out the survey with a few hours left in the event so that we can maximize the amount of people that fill out the survey. And by doing this, we've actually seen the percentage of people who fill out the surveys jump from 10 to 15% all the way up to 60 to 75%, which is actually pretty significant. So whether you do an incentive or you place it at a strategic moment throughout your event, just make sure you're being intentional with that decision so that you maximize the amount of people that are giving you feedback on your event. Because like I said, this information is extremely important and valuable for your future events. All right, those were all of the do's that I want to talk about in this video. Now let's move on to the don'ts. Something you don't want to do with your surveys is make them too long. The sweet spot of surveys is 5 to 10 questions. Depending on what type of questions you ask, you could make them a little shorter or make them a little longer. But what you don't want to do is make somebody fill out a survey for 20 to 25 minutes. Because what you'll see happen is they'll either get frustrated and just stop filling out the survey, or you'll see the quality of their answers begin to decrease because they're answering so many questions. Staying within that 5 to 10 question range really gives them the right amount of questions to put all of their mental energy into without getting too fatigued and also without getting too frustrated. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to have your survey presented to the attendees as they're leaving at the end of the event. And even worse, you don't want to send the survey out after the event. Because what is the incentive for somebody to do that? How many times have you gotten an email from an event you attended, or maybe it's a product you purchased or a movie you went to, where they sent you an email asking you for your review and you actually filled it out the next day or in the next couple days? If you do, kudos to you, but that's just something that I don't do. And when we used to do that, we would get very low response rates on our surveys. Do be intentional with how you format your survey and where you place it in your event, and don't rely on just sending it out after the event via email. One thing to clarify is, yes, you can send the survey out via email, but just don't make it your main method. If you present the survey at a good time during the event, and then you send a follow-up with the survey link inside of it just to get a few stragglers, that's totally okay, but just don't make that your main method. Something else I don't like to do with my surveys is ask only for positive feedback or ask only for negative feedback, because you really want both when asking for feedback from your attendees. And also, the frame that somebody is in when they're filling out the survey can actually sway the results quite significantly. If you only want positive feedback, the results really aren't going to be that realistic because everybody's in a positive frame and only thinking about the good things. However, if you only want negative feedback, everyone's going to be in that negative critical mindset, and you're probably going to get a lower attendee satisfaction score. And the data is also just going to be unrealistic. So make sure you're asking for both positive and negative feedback on your surveys. Up next is you don't want to put your surveys at an inconvenient time. And a great example of this is at registration. Something we did at the first event I ever planned was we put the pre-event survey right at registration. And it really just made it extremely chaotic and really slowed up registration. And it made every single one of our attendees very flustered because they had 500 people in line waiting for them to fill out a survey. It was very rushed, and the quality of responses we got was terrible. Make sure you're putting your surveys at a convenient time in the event so somebody can sit down and actually be intentional about their answers and give you genuine feedback. Along with that, you just don't want to cause too much friction in the survey process. Make sure it's easily accessible, whether you use something simple like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, or you use something advanced like Qualtrics. Just make sure it's very easy and simple for them to access so there's as little friction as possible. Because surveys already aren't that enjoyable. If there's any friction at all, they're most likely just not going to fill out the survey. And finally, the last don't I want to mention is do not do nothing with your survey results. As an event planner, it can be really hard to hear feedback on your event, especially if it's critical. And one of the biggest mistakes an event planner can make is to ignore negative feedback because they're too caught up in their ego and the event that they created. You're not making the event for yourself, you're making it for your attendees. So make sure you're listening to what your attendees have to say. And whether you get a bunch of positive feedback or a bunch of negative feedback, whatever it is, just make sure you're doing something with it. If it's all positive, continue to do what you do and maybe invest more energy into perfecting that strategy. And if you get a bunch of negative feedback, make sure you invest that same amount of energy into correcting your events and applying the feedback to future events so that your attendees are happy. You're not collecting this data simply just to look at it. You're collecting it to improve your events and to create a better experience for your attendees. All right, those are all the do's and don'ts I want to talk about in this video. Like I said, make sure you check out down below and look at the example survey questions that I have linked. And also keep an eye out for future videos I'm going to make on surveys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.